Alright, folks. Welcome back, everyone. 皆さん、おかえりなさい。今日は100、151日目です。This is day 151. And we have 5 grammar lessons left. So instead of waiting till tomorrow, we're going to clean cut May, right? This being the last day of May. And we're going to do the remaining, 5. So we're going to go through them. So let's see. Ta-da with do. Which one was ta-da? The conjunction particle. When the conjunction particle ta-da is used before that's the what if. Yeah, the other if conditional. When the conjunctive particle ta-da is used before the adverb do, it primarily presents a situation. Then asks a question about it potentially happening. This construction can be translated as why don't you A, or what if you did A. Realistically, it just means when A, how about that? It is often used for giving advice. To use this expression, convert the verb that you want to use into its tada form and then add do, which is the stem, right? Use the stem.
食べる量を減らしたらどう?
Oh, with da. It's da and then... Oh, wait. Hirashitara. I'm gonna need another verb, please. Can I get a different verb?
テレビがつかないの? 叩いてみたらどう?
Oh no. 叩いてみたら。Oh, Tataite and then me. Okay, so we got a miru, right? It's just a stem plus tara. Okay, so we're taking stem and tara. Okay. Sometimes tara is used by itself with a tone that implies that it is a question, or simply by adding a question mark in a written language. This is an abbreviation of tarado and carries the same nuance. Okay.
暇なら外に行ったら?
Okay. Da or ka may be added to the end of tarado to emphasize the question even further. However, they're not required. Fair enough.
警察に電話してみたらどうだ? 苦いなら砂糖を入れたらどうか?
Despite being used for giving advice, tarado may be interpreted as criticism. Due to this, care will need to be taken with your tone of voice. Yeah, okay. たまには顔を使ったらどう? Sorry, as I was reading that out loud, it was very rude. Like, why don't you use your head occasionally? Okay. Anyways, of all the phrases to use, I'm like, wait a minute. This seems a little passive aggressive. Okay. Oh, this is okay. So related. Do something. Yeah. Order language. The imperative or command form is used for blunt orders, right? Oh yeah, that is a thing, right? And it's just to do the column, which can be harsh. In contrast, tarado is a softer suggestion, similar to why don't you? Okay. I feel like there's even softer ways to say Masenka, is a polite way to extend an invitation, right? Similar to like, won't you, would you? It has a stronger tone. Oh, in contrast, yeah, tarado has a stronger tone and is used to suggest advice and course of action, right? Doesn't quite have the together thing. And then tara alone expresses a conditional hypothetical. Combined with do forms a suggestion. Although this one is really soft, right? It's a soft conditional. Yeah, halfway between. Oh, it's like halfway between if and when. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and he uses dot da. Right. And then what else would you have? It'd be better to. Yeah, advice. Sure. Both tarado and yeah, and then you use the past tense ta with holgai. Holgai can be used to give advice or suggestion. The key difference is that Olga-yi has a strong nuance that the speaker is advising the listener on what to do or what would be the best course of action. Tarado is more gentle, as it is suggesting a potential option. I'm trying to think of like English usage. Online, it's like command. Most of the time, it's the imperial. The imperative. I don't think people use the subjunctive mood too much. Which to me, the subjunctive mood is when you suggest something, especially indirectly, and you can be even more indirect by stating a example that can be seen as similar to the situation. Like in the third person, you can talk about a third person to indirectly suggest something. So like if someone is this is far more common. If someone is playing a game and they're trying to like solve a puzzle or something and another person is like, "Oh, I heard that this person did this." That is like the indirect way that I feel is most common, closest thing to subjunctive or suggestion. It actually often comes off as passive aggressive, right? Whenever it's really right on the no, like hitting the nail on the head situation. Like, hey, I was told this is the best way to do something. And then it would be exactly what that person is trying to do, but they weren't able to achieve it. That's the type of thing. This one, I feel like this is even more direct by asking the person, like, why don't you try doing this? What if you did this? And then yesterday, drama did the typical thing in net speak, pretty much. They basically say, oh, it's this, like no permission or whatsoever. It's simply, I know the answer, it's this. That's usually the English indicative form, which is basically instead of even asking the person, doing any of the person, reading the situation, is simply a projection of oneself. Which it's really going to be interesting to. Yesterday, I had a long conversation with Drama, and most of the cultural norms that I was like indirectly referencing and suggesting and whatnot are going to be, in my opinion, incredibly relevant when he decides to go and study in Japan and be in a face culture. So it'll be really interesting to see if that changes anything or how he adapts or something like that, because like the way he and I talk in English, it's incredibly contrasting. He's incredibly direct, competitive, compares apples and oranges, do not recognize generational gaps. Largely, they are all. He's always consistently, you know, cross-sectionally comparing people. So, like when he was talking about swimming, old people should get out of his way, right? He should have a lane of his own because he's fast, that type of thing. Very different from my type of upbringing. My upbringing is very like, oh well, typically if there are older people who are swimming, like for example, I would adapt to the older people and then find ways to engage myself and um, elevate myself while allowing the leeway for the older people. That would be something that would be immediately apparent the moment he gets to Japan. And I don't even live in Japan. I would say this is also true in uh, children of Chinese parents, as an extension, but I would imagine it's even more palpable when you go to like Japan or China. The idea is that the way we talk to each other, it's fairly clear that one finds self-importance and generational do not approach the generational gap like this. I talked about this a couple times. Learning Japanese revolve around that too. Revolve around all of these aspects where you're talking about casual conversations and providing suggestions or not providing suggestions, or indirectly how to soften stuff. Because in a face culture, that's like rule 101. Whether you're close or not. And for myself, my English dictates that too. So rarely do I go up to someone and it's like, hey, why don't you just do this? It's probably better for you. That would be like your odds are against you. You have 70% chance of possibly that person will, again, the person will probably politely say, oh, well, thank you for the suggestion. But really, it was more like, thank you for the suggestion, foreigner. Because you crossed a etiquette, you crossed a courtesy line. However, you are also excused because if it's very apparent that you're a foreigner or someone who has a different cultural norm, you do the polite thing, which is effectively how me and Drama like indirectly communicate. Like I usually point out things like, well, I mean, you guys share the pool, right? The facility is for both the old people and the young person. So the courtesy is that, in fact, it's actually weighted. The older people have leeway, not the younger people. So it's a really pretty normative thing that I tend to talk about quite a bit because I did grow up in a country where generational gaps are not that normally appreciated. I think if it was anyone else, for example, or maybe someone else that isn't grown from a face culture, right? Maybe like a European descent person, I think drama would be more along the lines of the social norms. These are the things I think about every day. Like when I meet a stranger, or if I meet a stranger, I'm constantly using my English based on things like this. Like I talk about these all the time. Like how do you suggest something without encroaching upon the person's face? Now, that doesn't mean that I can't just be direct with the other person, because if the other person prefers that I be direct and I'm not being direct, then that's on me, right? So I'm not saying that always being indirect or being modest, being casual is appropriate. Appropriate is two people thing. So I'm not saying that the way drama communicates versus the way I communicate is one is better than the other. It's the comparing and contrasting of when it's appropriate and when it's not, and how it's going to change. So to me, it's interesting that drama shares a lot about them consuming like Japanese native content and all that stuff, but I'm not entirely sure if the whole cultural aspect of speaking and behavioral aspect is going to be an interesting culture shock, or maybe it's not that apparent, where the idea is some people may see they have to hear and be in the moment in order to appreciate it. Like, for example, I speak English, so somehow oftentimes when I explain these things, which I do explain these things quite a lot in English, basically when someone says, oh, I have a male acquaintance in the office that I have a conflict. How do I resolve the conflict? And a lot of the things deal with politeness or casualness, or reading these passive, are you being passive aggressive, or like micro, those, well, what do you call them? There was a fun meme where microaggression, or they had these words that were memed to heck on the internet. Anyways, the idea is resolving like the mode of communication between the two people. Like, is there not necessarily a miscommunication, but more so a lack of a like a cultural emotional connection. And one of them is this. A lot of times I think the irony, or maybe for me the dramatic irony, perhaps, I'm not saying I would predict the future, however it feels a little dramatic irony on my part when someone who wants to go and live in a face culture eventually talk to someone who grew up in a face culture like myself, like partial face culture, and that interaction is not clear. Like, it's not clearly communicated that when you speak a certain way in English, it also translates to how you speak in Japanese. Or learning Japanese and learning all these rules and all these nuances didn't translate into your consideration in your English. To me, that tells me that this person code switches, which is fine, right? Like, I'm a code, like I do code swapping too. It does tell me that they're code swapping. So like, they can appreciate understanding these nuances. Here's the funny irony. The person was actually like drama when he was talking about the correct answer. He was actually referring to one of these topics instead of using to, right? Like, or using to for if and then statement, or like a conditional statement. There are other ways to say if situationally that requires other nuance, but instead he provided the answer directly while ruling out immediately like the function of the if, and the if condition that was used. Meanwhile, I was like negotiating with myself. I was going over all the different ifs and different conditionals that I could use. That's kind of like, I feel like that's going to be the culture shock that happens, where someone goes to Japan despite spending a lot of time learning Japanese, like indirectly or what have you, but not really absorbing the etiquettes and the courtesy. So you go to Japan then, and then when you start to output based on whatever these situations are, then it would feel like every moment you have to watch what you say. Which to me, a lot of people would say, wow, that sounds like a nightmare. Like, why would you want to grow up in a culture that when you're out and about, you always have to watch what you say? You always have to make sure that you are polite and courteous, regardless of how trivial the interaction is or something. Like, there's no triviality to public interaction. That is the basis of the face culture. So this is a part of Japanese that I don't have to be Japanese or learn Japanese to appreciate. I like learning Japanese because of that very reason. It actually brings me a lot closer to Chinese and my behavior, right? And learning English is very different. Like English, a lot of times I spend more of my time code swapping in English. So it's kind of humorous because I do the opposite of drama when I'm speaking English, where I have to be more direct. Like there are situations where I could lead to miscommunication if I'm not being direct, largely because code swapping is much more preferred than a hybridization. So, like when someone says, "Oh, can you help me?" or "Can you recommend something?" Usually, I would have this roundabout way of suggesting things and showing, examples, anecdotes, and comparative analyses in order to demonstrate usable information and making a soft suggestion at what that usable information is relevant to that person. That to me is what I see as Eastern culture, and Eastern culture does that. Western culture would be straight up just tell you, I recommend the best. I think this is the best, use it. Or this is the right answer. I know the right answer. Here's the right answer. And that's kind of this topic goes really deep because generally speaking, on the internet, if you're on Twitch or on your YouTube, right, the vast majority of people will use English in an incredibly indicative, direct way. Rarely is it ever a suggestion, it's a dictation. So stuff like this reminds me of how much I typically vary away from other speakers of English. I'm not sure. Now here's a meta of this. When people learn English, right, like those who learn English as a second language, do they code swap directly into the indicative voice? Because attention is spent less by people who teach and speak English to sound like that. Like, for example, it's not like people are learning English from a politician or a science teacher or a someone who is likely to use the subjunctive, someone who's likely to have suggestive language, which is typically like someone who, like a lawyer or someone who's in policy or something that deals with having to posture between people. Usually when they learn English, it's probably from someone online, is my guess, and someone who is very accessible using colloquial English. Colloquial English is incredibly rude in Japanese, in my opinion, personally. If I had to like take a leap, it's not that far of an imagination to know that when the things that are commonly considered casual in English is incredibly direct, uncomfortable, and probably a little bit alienating, especially if it comes to the idea of dictating ideas to someone. In Chinese, it's very similar too. When like my parents, over the time, my parents often need to negotiate these cultural things. Someone comes up, it's like, "Oh, I think you mean this. This is exactly what it means." And my parents would be, "Oh, thank you." Meanwhile, it's more like, "Oh, thank you, foreigner." Like, "Oh, thank you. It's normal for you to do this." And then obviously, if the foreigner or the person who expects something back, like, "Oh, I did you the favor," or like, "I'm just trying to help you," and then you're expecting that my parents or like for myself would reciprocate in the same way, that may not necessarily happen. And I think in Japan, it's probably not going to necessarily happen either in the way that you would expect. Like, "Oh yeah, I helped you all the time with your grammar," or "I gave you answers all the time. So I was kind of expecting you to normally do that back." Like that would be inappropriate. It would be considered rude. Now, it's not rude for the other person coming from a different culture to do that because they are typically right in the matter of taste. So, like, for example, I'm going to channel my parents. Whatever they act is normalized to them. It is only polite to understand and tolerate that. So, like, if like we have someone we know who is constantly ordering us around, we would do our best. We would take the order, do the order without concerning, like avoiding going against their order because that's kind of how they interact. However, the reverse is different. When you're being agreeable in public, you don't speak most of your disagreements. You don't push back. You don't, like, that's kind of why whenever you think about Japanese culture, at least in my opinion, the thing I resonate with, and by extension Chinese culture, is that you're always saving face. You always save face for the person who is more direct. You're trying to be as agreeable as possible. It doesn't matter if you know more than that person. It doesn't matter if you're older than that person and all of that. If that person belongs to a different culture that doesn't appreciate the underlying nature of, like, nobility, refinement, seniority, and all that, you are responsible for holding up that appearance. So that's kind of like the big deep cuts oftentimes when someone asks me, like, oh, you'll never understand this, or you'll never understand or do that, and I'm like, I wouldn't be so sure. I wouldn't tell you, though. I'm not a person who would sit here and say, well, you don't know that for sure, like, or you don't know. I got a little better at this oftentimes, where someone would say, well, you can't possibly appreciate Japanese culture in any way without ever visiting Japan. And it's like, well, yes and no, but I wouldn't say that. I would say, yeah, you're probably right. I've never been to Japan, so there's no way I would be able to understand the face culture that is in Japan growing up with Chinese parents, right? And then someone would say, well, yeah, you're right. Like, yeah, that's right. I know I'm right because Chinese people aren't the same as Japanese people. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The alternative way would be, like, if you were talking to two foreigners who are in a direct culture, is that they would argue about the similarities and differences between Japanese and Chinese people, right? And one of the similarities would be that they are both face cultures. And face culture means that the very interaction with the stranger, or like when you're arguing in a public space, that part is very consistent. It's one of the more consistent things. And obviously the inception point is that the very nature of what I do on a daily basis is a public space. So I'm rarely directly confrontational. And relationships with anyone online doesn't ever get past the point of where there's, like, access to very casual conversations. Like, you don't typically have very casual conversations in a public space. So this topic, endless conversations about making suggestions and stuff. I rarely ever make a suggestion that would try to lower the status of another person's competence. Ever. Like, the rare times when someone's like, oh, please just lean into me, like, don't worry, I don't care if it's a public space, like, they really have to hammer home, like, oh, I don't care, like, you can do this, you can go ahead and do that, I promise, or something like that. If they're really adamant, then there is a chance I would provide, like, critique and stuff that would lower the person's competence, or, like, would bring the person's judgment into criticism, entirely just into criticism. Like, you're wrong. You don't say that. If you're culturally sensitive to what things like this means, and right, like it's very, very difficult to even suggest something, let alone go up to someone and say you're wrong. Now, there are countries, right? There are countries that the entirely other perspective is far more noble, right? Far more noble or accepting and whatnot. Like, being honest is the best policy, right? So and a lot of particular countries in Europe does that. So it's an alternative perspective. Like, oh, being honest is admirable and golden and whatnot, versus being tolerant. Being tolerant and stoic is the golden. Tolerant, stoic, and agreeable. Not, right, like humble, stoic, apologetic, tolerant. Those are the things that are very gold standard. I don't know if how much of that would translate whenever maybe one day I'll visit Japan. I don't really find most of this type of thing alien to me, even when explained in a language format or looking at culture. In fact, when I was growing up, because of the availability of Japanese media versus Chinese media, Chinese media is actually a bit rare, because of the government and whatnot. Japanese media, because of Japanese media makes me feel at home. Like the way people depict, even the exaggerated stuff when you're watching anime and manga, or even like news programs or watching like dramas and stuff, they're still closer to what I grew up with, despite not being Japanese, than watching English content. Because Americanized content, British, French, German, Italian, most of them tend to be from a direct culture, individualistic, very direct, and expressive. So that's the stuff that I learned later. Like, I'm far more expressive than I was. I talked about this a lot when I was younger. I was far more expressive now than I've ever been. And oftentimes it's kind of uncomfortable knowing how occasionally I would be far more expressive, or maybe even confrontational time to time. Yeah, very, very important topic. And it's cool to be able to start to express that in Japanese. I still obviously have no idea. There's still so much time to adjust how to express this. I can express nearly all of these things in English, though. And typically, that's how I speak English to a stranger. I think these topics exist in English. They don't exist for people who speak English without a face culture. So, like, the importance of this distinction is very, very important to me. It's not trivial. It's not about getting the right answer. It's about internalizing the understanding that all of this stuff, you should be thinking about this stuff every time you go and type a sentence, open your mouth in public. That's kind of how I typically feel about it. And it's not a bad thing. It's, in my opinion, it's almost a point of pride. Much like if you ask like a French person, for example, I'm generalizing, obviously, like a French person or a French person, an Italian person, or like a British person, when they speak, they talk about their heritage, their personalities, and they speak with pride. Actually, I met I guess a Moroccan like 2 days ago, and they talked about their language, like boastfully talk about their language. They might not think it's boastful. They might think it's friendly. like, hey, you should learn Arabic. It's a beautiful, holy, sanctimonious um, language that has deep histories and stuff. And meanwhile, my first thought is, how can I convey that Chinese is also ancient, and so, and Chinese is related to Japanese without being boastful, without being prideful in its elegance, right? Like it not making a competition about the language. So what I did was I spent 5 to 10 minutes talking about the people. I don't have people who speak Arabic around me. I'm not exposed to people who are like that. So I was trying to be courteous by suggesting, like, if I've met someone who's very charming and speaks Arabic and whatnot and encourages me while we're building a friendship, then that might happen. But I have no plans. And it's not because Chinese and Japanese more important than Arabic. The thing is, that's like the dance that, at least in my opinion, I try to speak in, because the English has to also reflect my cultural background. And my cultural background is typically, if you start making a competition about everything, then you are no longer a communal person. So that's when I was talking to Drama yesterday about, like, it seems like you make most things into competitions, right? It's about apples and oranges. You're faster than the old people, so naturally you would presume that you swam more than the old people, etc., even though despite you share a facility that is mutually run for multiple people, that type of thing. That, in my opinion, is one of the first, at least one of the top 10 things I would think, again, not Japanese, that will be learned in Japan. The moment when that perspective can line up with me, right? Because I grew up where you respect the place, the people in the place. You're not the main character. You're part of a bigger community. So nearly all of your comments when you make that typically are more like online influence, like Americanized as well. Online influence where, like, oh, I'm just faster, so I'm more important, or I'm younger and more fit, so I'm more important than older people. That type of thing, despite not what you're saying, right? Like, you're not saying that, right? I'm not accusing people saying that intentionally to be harmful. Drawing those comparisons are inappropriate and can be considered rude in a different country, especially where seniority and cultural gaps and generational gaps are very valued, like Japan. So I look forward to seeing how people change, or maybe not change at all. Who knows? So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in the future. I am often indirectly projecting a face culture most of the time by default to see if anyone, like, resonates with me, and it's very rare. Despite having so many people who are enthusiastic about Japanese culture, it's usually more like they filter what they want to see in Japanese culture, in my opinion. The filtering is what makes it pretty obvious when the behavior doesn't line up with the importance. Like, this stuff to me is like the core of language. You have to be able to understand how important the stuff is. Like, it's very hard to turn it off. Like, there's no simplification, which happens, in my opinion, in Western culture. For better or for worse, or whatever perspective you have, you have simpler policies. Like, honesty is the best policy. No, not real. Like, it's not to say lying is a good thing or an acceptable thing, but honesty is the best policy enables certain types of behavior and ways of talking that simplifies like things like English, where, oh, as long as your intentions are pure, you can say whatever. No, that's not true in a face culture. You can still be a jerk, chastised for being kind because you took no consideration for the person you're talking to. Right? Your intentions are kind. That's a selfish motivated role. You're using the other person as a reasoning to excuse your behavior. So when you try to help someone and they say like, "Hey, sorry, I didn't ask for help. Can you like, are you a, could you please allow me my space?" And then someone's like, "But I'm just trying to help." Instead of saying, "I'm sorry to disturb you. If you ever need any help, please, I'm around." Right? That would be a way to go around to offer help while apologizing for the infraction. But generally speaking, apologetic language it doesn't happen in English. It is implied that as long as you have good intentions, you have no need to apologize. Well, that would be the selfish take. It's selfish benevolence. And nowadays, you don't even get that. You don't even get a question. You don't get asked at all. Like, in fact, I was told by this. Here's an anecdote, and it happened in a public space. So most of the stuff that I talk about is in a public space. There's someone or somewhere, it's on the internet. Someone told me once that they really love to learn Chinese, right? They really love to learn Chinese. And they tried to explain to me about like Chinese behavior because they spoke to a Chinese friend, right? And what they did was they told me how I should behave because a real Chinese person told them what real Chinese people do. And my first thought was, in order to tell them, it's like, well, have the person communicated to you about how you're disseminating this information, because the way you're behaving towards me would be one of the fundamental misconducts of trying to be Chinese. Like, this person was very enthusiastic. They believe that they want to move to China or something like that and act like Chinese person, but they acted like a foreigner, thinking they know the rules about Chinese etiquette, and then they're dictating it to someone by inferring all the things that they don't know for sure. That is like a violation of one of the tenets of a face culture. Like, you don't go up to someone and dictate to them something you don't know for sure. You don't ever open your mouth when you're not sure. You ask. So this is kind of my conversation or my dance that I have so often whenever I meet someone who says, "Oh yeah, I know a lot about Japanese culture. I know a lot about Chinese culture. Their history is so rich, and I've learned a lot, and I know a lot. But do you behave like it? Like, have you internalized it?" Right? Because I'm really curious when that happens. Or maybe it never happens, right? I'm genuinely curious when one day, I hope I live long enough, I would want to see what happens when in adults, like a older person, right? Maybe someone in their 20s, go to a different country, right? Like Japan is a really big one. And then be able to talk to them like 10 years later and see what parts they adopted, what parts they rejected, because I can't do that for a lot of things anymore, largely because I didn't grow up in one culture, so like, or homogeneously in one culture. So whenever, if you want to know, like, how do you know when person rejects one culture or they live in a homogenous culture? Is usually because the default is usually you're always concerned. You're always concerned about whether you are behaving appropriately for the context. So it's not, a lot of people don't stay healthy doing this. They typically then try to simplify and choose one or the other. Alternatively, I think most multicultural environments would have the people relate based on how potentially exhausting but also rewarding it can be. So you can be both prideful in the idea of your own accolades, your own person, your own individual, but you can also be prideful about how tolerant you are and how people pleasing you are. Again, in the Western world, at least in my opinion, the Western culture right now, a high excess people pleasing is considered unhealthy, right? Like, it's hard to balance, and I totally agree. In an environment that doesn't benefit a people pleaser, right? And I'm not saying you go all or none in people pleasing in like Japan or China. The idea is, though, it's a different extent. Meritocracies, there are merits and deeds when it comes to people pleasing in different countries. So for myself, I had to learn that people pleasing is in fact unrewarding in a Western culture, like a lot of times. So when I can feel when someone said like, oh yeah, be careful, you need to balance people pleasing with, your own objectives and stuff. In the places that I lived, so the places that I live, people pleasing is not rewarded. It's not adequately compensated for. Now, being a people pleaser when you're running a business in a face culture, that's a different story, because that is etiquette. It is a typical etiquette. So being agreeable, I've literally been criticized for being too agreeable before, where someone would say, they would tell me Merry Christmas, and I would say Happy Holidays. Thank you. And then this person literally said like, wait, why didn't you say Merry Christmas back? It's not like I would be offended or something. Like, you wouldn't need to presume. And that's kind of the idea. Like, you want to be agreeable. So typically that means that you don't get a direct answer most of the time. And that can be seen as offensive, right? Offensive, passive, and whatnot. So oftentimes when I think of Japanese, especially public Japanese, it's incredibly apologetic, which is also by extension a Chinese thing in public. How often do I interact with such people? Not really. Not in this line of thing. So it'll be cool to see how someone that I know today change or not change, again, whatever varying degrees they do when they go and seek their cultural displacements or cultural substitution or cultural adaptation. For myself, not an authority on Japanese culture, but at least I can say I didn't live in a situation where it was normal for someone to say, as long as I'm objectively right, I have no reason to not say the things I'm saying. It's like, yeah, there are lots of reasons for you to not to say anything despite knowing something. And I tell that to most of the people who, spend at least some extended time around me. I don't speak when not asked. Like, if someone is not asking me to disclose something or asking me to help them out, I might not literally do it. not anymore, because it's a balance. I do not concern myself too much. I trust that the people I'm talking to will do that. And this is where me and Procall earlier, Procall is probably on the bed or something, but me and Procall, like, we have to circumnavigate this, because I am not the most like forward person in reaching out. So like it's always a 50-50 ish between me. Like, I'm not a coddly person, but I am also somewhat that. Things that people would say, like, oh, if you care about a person, you would show it without explaining, right? Without asking. But yes, from a Western style like culture, where you go out of your way to get into someone's business because you're really concerned about them. It has to pass a certain threshold, and the threshold is a lot greater. I even had this conflict of interest before over Japanese. Even learning a language was very controversial. Like, do you learn from your mistakes, or do you want to avoid ever making a mistake? That's actually a conflict of interest that I have. I actually like the more westernized thing, where you learn from your mistakes. Like, you make a mistake and you learn from it, right? However, if you were to ask my parents or like the other cultural things, your fear of never making a mistake, right? Your fear of ever making a mistake is probably enough to make sure that you never make a mistake. And that's kind of a balance. So that's where I kind of discarded some, or like balance out a lot of it. When I was growing up, you don't make mistakes. Mistakes are not tolerated. So ironically, it's kind of like the internet, where if you're going to beat a game, you have to be perfect. You aim for perfect. You don't aim for, like, I don't know, your own way or something like that. Anyways, all right. So, suggestions. We got it. I think that's just a stem, right? Stem and verb. Okay. Next one is considered, is thought of as. So we have to. That's probably for quoting, right? For quoting, for citing. And then kangaerarete. So thought as, right? Like how is this? Causative? Yeah, it's causative, and then iru, or it is, right? It is. So it is in its citation usage, the case marking particle to is often used with verbs in the passive form, yeah, causative, passively causative. Two of these regularly occurring verbs are kangaerarete. I really need to hear this. To be considered, and then omowarete iru, to be thought. Okay. This grammar point is used after a phrase and translates as "it is considered that A" or "it is thought that A." It is generally used to highlight a commonly held opinion that most people agree on, not your personal opinion. This is the other one. It's great that we're getting to these. I do this all the time, and I have to clarify. Like 90% of the time, I have to clarify this. So, I think this is true. And when I'm not using I'm referring to people, as in like someone that's not myself. And then it's generally being thought as, considered to be true. So in English, oftentimes, whenever someone, like over time, someone will find me saying this, like, okay, are you saying you think this? Or you heard this from somewhere and you believe, you're relaying it to me, like hearsaying it, right? And The person was like, what do you mean? It's always my opinion. That's why I'm telling you. It's like, well, duh, you presume it's my opinion. And I'm like, I don't. So I just wanted to make sure I clarify. It's like, do you believe this is good? Or are you saying other people believe this is good? So therefore, and oftentimes online, most people project their opinions based on other people's opinions. So they're one and the same often. They're like, oh, I think this game is really good. And I'm like, can you explain to me why this game is really good? And then they will proceed to either talk about what other people think or themselves. You don't know for sure because it's both a lot of times. Like a lot of times you're swinging for the fences. You don't know if this person is projecting an opinion that's shared by a lot of people and therefore it is also one of their own, or they develop that opinion on their own in the absence of other people. So whenever someone says, oh, I absolutely love this game because of the music, and I would assume first, I would presume that when they say I love the music in this game, I could ask them about the music in the game because it would be based on their experience. When I asked them, it's like, oh, hey, what do you like about this music, right? And they would say, oh, it's because it's very popular, a lot of people like it, and I like hang out with a lot of people to listen to it. I'm like, oh, okay, so you like it because other people also like it? They're like, no, I like, it's not clear whether you like something. That's kind of all of this stuff. Like, are you thinking, or are you saying other people think this? And when you're trying to be passive and not trying to be too forward, you humble yourself and you typically you don't technically share your personal opinions first. You share what the general like community first before expressing your personal opinion. Actually, oftentimes you might not ever express your personal opinion. Usually the community comes first. So whenever someone asks me, oh, hey, have you played this game before? And I'm like, I have not. Like, I haven't personally played it. Although I have heard that this is considered to be one of the best games, or arguably, debatably one of the best games in 2026. I was told that, it sold about 14 million copies and it had a aggregate ratio of 9 out of 10. So it's considered to be, by most margins, very successful game of 2026. Not my opinion. That's not my opinion. It is thought to be considered that. So this is exactly what I would say in English. In Japanese, that's how they say it. When someone talks to me in English and they tell me like, oh, Japanese people are very thoughtful and they do this, and I'm like, yes, English does too. And some people are like, well, not, I don't ever do that, and my friends don't do that. Like, people on the internet don't do that. It's like, yeah, okay, like I agree with you on that too, because it would have to take a cultural understanding to weigh in on how that. The question here is, does it exist or not? Well, humans still exist, so their languages have to depict their cultural things. So if your culture that you grew up in doesn't have a personal behavioral preference and that doesn't exist, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? Back the whole like null thing, where someone, if you can't confirm its existence, it's not evidence for its non-existence. If you can't confirm it, you can't confirm it. That's not evidence for its lack of existence. So for me, English, this happens a lot, where someone would tell me how Japanese, right? Japanese, or I'm not sure about Chinese because I haven't read a grammar text about Chinese, but in Japanese, they say a lot of things typically from a foreigner aspect, and say like, oh yeah, their language, they're so considerate for things. Like, yes, and other languages can likely do similar things, but a different way, still achieve those things, but different way. It's dependent on the cultural normities in it. So whenever someone says, oh, well, I think this game is great and my opinion is the only thing that matters, and my first thought is, thank you for informing me, because now I can better understand how to talk to you. Because if you think your opinion is the only thing that matters, then I need to behave appropriately to understand that. I literally have to consider their opinion in order to be agreeable to them. Otherwise, it would be two people expressing their own personal opinions, and you're hoping that both of their personal opinions are serendipitously aligned with each other. How does that happen? When you grow up in the same country with the same same monocultural norms. That's how you can serendipitously have these same opinions. So in a country where there's individualistic opinions, you're hoping that most of the opinions are similar. You go around saying, my opinion is the only opinion that is correct, then you're hoping that the place you grew up in also all have similar opinions. So then you can make friends and talk to other people and have a cogent conversation, because you no longer have to worry about whether the other person has a conflict of interest with you. And then most of the strategies is to resolve the conflict of interest. And how is that different? Usually in a multicultural aspect, you would try to come to a mutual compromising agreement that both our opinions can exist. When you're in a monocultural country, you try to agree on one overarching, settled, compromise opinion. Like, there's no coexistence. There's only one. That not that it always get achieved, but that's the tendency. So someone's got to be right, and it might as well be everyone. So like for example, me and John, when we talk, we have to agree on a point. Like, not that I have a different perspective, Drama has a different perspective. That's usually me talking, where I would say, well, yes, you could be frustrated that there are slow swimmers in the pool, but when he said something like, oh, well, they should stay in their lane, in their slow lane, and then leave the fast lane to the faster swimmers. And then my counter argument, or my slight indirect jab, was that, well, fast people should stay out of the slow lane, or the majority lane, right? That means that someone has to compete for the right opinion. And that's kind of the conversational dynamic that I share, at least with someone like that, right? That speaks like that. Alternatively, I would simply acknowledge, like, well, I wasn't there. I don't operate in their, I don't know what it's like to live there and all that. So I'm not going to say anything. I'm simply going to acknowledge that, oh, okay, I guess this is how young people interact with old people. And you just accept it. I always have interesting stories. Yeah. I try to, the irony here, Beth, is that I think about these things all the time, because that's what makes interacting with people a joy, right? Like, you can't not end up having interesting stories if you think about people's motivations to do things. It's been like that ever since I was growing up. That's how I can fit in. Like, when I was a kid, I had a really hard time fitting in. And it's not because I had ADHD or like some mental disorder or some emotional intelligence or an atypical behavioral pattern. I'm not using those excuses. Like, in my opinion, I am not using those excuses for myself, whether if they exist or not. I found that it's because of cultural differences that made it weird. Like, emotional intelligence was something that kids thrive on when I was like they were emotionally intelligent. They were discovering that stuff when they were younger. I was not. I was not interested in emotional intelligence. And it kind of blended really rough because I think that a vast majority of people, when I interact with them, they think that I don't know anything. Which is because it's true. You don't share anything. Like if someone told me, like, came up to my face and said, "Oh, you're wrong about this," my first inclination would be like, "Huh, why do you think that? Can you explain it to me? Can you explain to me how you come to the conclusion that I'm wrong about this thing?" And then I'll try my best to rectify whatever that makes you so offended by what I'm wrong about. That would be the first thing I would do, because I embrace more so the face culture than I do individualism. I don't necessarily defend myself. I don't need to defend myself. That's kind of the thing. The difference is, like, you don't gain very much. Like, for me, I don't gain very much satisfaction by telling the other person whatever it means to be right about a situation. There's no requirement for that. As long as you're very agreeable and you try your best to be polite and whatnot, that is the gold standard. And then obviously, I've met plenty of people who say, well, if you're always being polite, doesn't mean that you're being disingenuous and lying. Like, isn't that being pretentious in its own way? It can be when you grow up in a country that, or a culture, whatever. It doesn't have to be a geographical country. If you grow up in a situation where that is considered cheap, right? I've literally been told, like, being stoic and tolerant is cheap because you're not being honest. And my first thought is, well, how do you know I'm not being honest if I'm raised to behave this way? Like, oh, but you're never going to express your true self, like, you're always bottling something up. Like, I'm not bottling anything. Being polite and being agreeable is part of my identity. So if you're saying that's just cheap, then we can appreciate that we can't be friends, right? If that annoys you, that's one of the things. The other thing that happens a lot on the internet, especially even between, like, very cogent people, is that going to suggestions. When you're constantly helping someone and someone is trying to learn something, that is a very different take. Like, I remember going to high school, right? Going to middle school when kids are learning how to learn, right? Face culture, sink or swim. You learn to deal with it. You learn to excel. There's no, like, hey, get someone to help you situation. You learn because you can. You are not deficient in any way. That is the default. So in this like kind of generational world, people learn by being explained to what they need to learn, right? So, but because of that, they don't deal with anything. Like, you don't learn anything. You get the right thing. So whenever someone gives me, like, an answer, I don't react, right? And someone would say, well, you're welcome. It's like, I know who it is. Earlier on, when I met this person literally told me that I'm the first person they've ever tried to teach something. And my first thought was, I wasn't going, like, I was trying to tell them, like, I didn't ask you to teach me anything. Like, there's a difference between me asking you, "Oh, how's your day?" Like, "Hey, can you explain this to me?" versus this person just comes in and says, "Oh, I know more than you, so I'm going to try to help you out." And then suddenly what they did was they immediately talked like they were doing me a favor that I didn't ask for. And that would be a cultural barrier problem. I would simply say thank you, right? Like I would say thank you, thanks for helping me, like, um, but I wouldn't say do it again or like continue because that would be a person that I would have cultural problems with. Basically, sometimes when you help someone out, the way that benefits just you, like for example, if you're seeking someone, say like I would go around and like, oh yeah, I know a lot about English, so I'm just gonna go around to other people's chats, right? Like go to other Japanese streamers chats who are learning English, and I would like say like, oh, it's this, it's that, it's that. To me, if I had to gamble, maybe 9 out of 10 times it's considered rude. Now, it is not that the person is going to say, oh, that's rude or something. They know that if you're on an Americanized platform like Twitch and YouTube, they normalize that. To me, there's some subtextual things. I'm not ungrateful for someone trying to be honest. At the same time, you also have to be aware that someone who always think they know better, they're better than someone, younger than someone, faster than someone, who always think that they have liberties and rights. They do, right? Grew up in the United States. Most people are entitled to things and they have liberties and rights. That is true when they're comparing themselves to some objective metric, not to another human being. When you compare yourself to another human being, then it gets complicated because you're saying, oh, you have the right to act like a jerk because you're telling the truth and you were just trying to help. That you have the right to your opinion. And like, yes, but now you're talking to a human who's also has a right to their opinion. So the default is to understand where both sides are coming from, at least from my perspective. So it's kind of a cheeky thing. I've already engaged in this with like 3 or 4 people, like Drama and Protocol. We already talked about these things about having opinions and having your social liberties. And usually I would say something like when someone says, oh, well, I'm entitled to my opinions. And I'm like, yes, you are. And that's it. Like, it ends there. You don't, I don't go further and I'm curious. So what would happen is I would wait to see if they say anything else. Like, oh, okay, well, thanks. I'm entitled to my opinions, yes. And that would tell me. It would tell me what type of person I'm speaking to, or like a judgment of character, right? And that's not saying that that person is bad or good. It's saying, oh, now I know. So when I need to express an opinion, I would state the opinion without asking. Like, the thing I would typically say is, oh, it appears that you're having trouble with this. Would you be comfortable in me sharing something about this topic? Usually that's pretty uncomfortable already. So most of the time, how do and if you're wondering then how does a Japanese person, or by proxy, or how does a Chinese person be helpful, right? You're asking like, well, then how are they ever helpful? How do you show that you care? You stay available. That's, in my opinion, how I've learned, um, in my own way, how like a face culture works. You be available. That's it. You don't draw attention to yourself. You be available. So how do my parents behave around me? Um, they make themselves available at any time. So when I do in fact need help, they are available. It's not they think they know better to some extent. Whenever I need help, they trust that I ask for help and that they would be available to do so. So they do everything in their um, power. So for me, that's how I communicate. So whenever someone asks, like, hey, then how can you be helpful when you want to be helpful? Make yourself apparently available. So how do I do that? I tell people, hey, I'm always on Discord. I I type a lot. I read. This is what I do. This is how I spend my time. So at any time during these times, I will be available. And if they say nothing to me, that doesn't matter. Like, what I mean is, if they don't need my help, I never hear from them. That's the whole point. The idea is it's voluntary. So the alternative is this is how I would talk to someone else who has grown up in a Western society a lot of times. They would say something like, I don't get it. I help out lots of people, but they don't like help me back. Or like, I always do all these things for everyone. Why doesn't anyone ever thank me or care about me? Or like, I I've made all these things and lots of people benefit from it. Where's my cut? That's that's not a bad or good thing again. It's one is individualized and the other is communal. So if you have a lot of people who are constantly available, like if you grew up in a country where most people simply make themselves available to be used, right? To be used, that would suck if you're in an individualistic country, because if you're a people pleaser, it leaves you vulnerable to be abused, used, right? Taken advantage of. It's not because it's weaker or stronger, it's more so it's inappropriate. Like, it's inappropriate for the system. You're not acting on selfish, like trying to selfishly promote yourself, because competition in the individualistic country creates strong individuals, like stronger individuals. So that's where me and Drama, we like kind of do not, we're kind of always at opposite ends here. When he says like, oh, I'm faster, they're slower. I'm like, well, there are many things that you aren't, and you are many things that they aren't. You just so happen to favor and choose the thing that favors you, right? That's where that's what my perspective would be. And then my first thought is, well, if there are so many of them, how can I do what they can do while also achieving what I can do? That's kind of the first type of thing you would talk about. So in this way, that's why I would have more interesting stories, because a lot of the stories aren't my own. They're not just my own stories. Maybe it's also because I'm getting older, right? I'm getting older, so I have a lot of stories. The idea is it's no longer interesting for me personally to keep telling my own stories, like the stories of my own perspective, stories of my own thing. However, I grew up in a environment where typically I don't share any of these unless it's for the very purpose of connecting with someone else. If someone shares something with me, it is a privilege. It is a gift. So you are inclined to share back And that is how you would demonstrate your gratefulness, right? Not the other way around, where if you do something for someone else, you're expecting them to pay you back. That is a very different story. So, like, look at me, I do this thing really well. I don't understand why no one's paying attention to me if I can be a polyglot, right? Like, if I'm a polyglot and I don't understand why no one is paying attention to me. I know like 9 different languages, just like this other person. That is, to me, like a different culture. It's a different aspect of a culture that I don't really resonate with too much. The meritocracy is recognized simply by existing. So, like, you do things and you get the privilege. You get the privilege and the gift of someone, like, helping someone, moving someone along. That is the kind of more of an idealistic portrayal of a face culture. You're contributing to the community, and as that you're contributing to a community, you are no more important than anyone else in that community. You're trying your best to be your best contributor to the community. So oftentimes when I get into the pool, like I go to the gym, my first thought is, like, here's a funny, interesting story. In a gym, when you're sharing a gym space, right, a lot of times you have to clean your station. Like, there are behaviors where you like clean your station and making sure the wipes. So there are times where you can run out of wipes and whatnot. So when I went to the gym, I got into the habit of creating a routine where if the gym runs out of supplies, like to clean the bench or something, I typically bring towels and stuff with me. So like when I leave, it doesn't matter if my contributions are so, like, someone would say, well, someone's just gonna get it dirty anyways. There are 100 of people going in the gym. Your small contribution won't make a big difference. I'm like, it's not the idea of your contribution as one person. It's the idea that you did it. So yes, it is inappropriate. Like, what I mean is, if you're in a individualistic country and you keep thinking about the whole, like you keep thinking, oh, you go to the gym, so you make sure to bring extra wipes, you wipe down your station, you set everything back in order, and then you leave. And then someone from an individualistic country would say, like, well, it doesn't matter because, like, someone else is just going to come by and mess up all the order and leave their sweat all over the place, and they're not going to do anything about it, and they're just going to walk out. It just kind of makes your actions moot. Like, well, it does. Like, to me, it's what I did to the best of my ability to the community. And I hope that through my actions, other people may choose to do that. If not, that's tough luck. So in order for people pleasing, right, like people pleasing to be acceptably healthy for a person, even though it's not really in a individualistic country, you look out for number one, right, most of the time. And I've kind of understood that. So I kind of do like a 30-70. I look out for number one a lot of times. Like, sometimes I just can't, I accept that, yeah, no one's going to care about trying to keep the place clean, right? Keep the gym clean and stuff. But I like doing it. Doing it is what matters. Not whether it will change things or you get recognized for doing so. That is not the same as merit. Merit is you do it because you can, not you do it and hope you get rewarded for it. Like, hey, look at me, I'm a really nice person, I'm cleaning the gym equipment, even though everyone else don't do it. I'm doing it. Can people put a spotlight on me? That's not the same. It's kind of like it's almost, I'm not sure if Beth or whoever will listen, like whoever watches this later, if you ever get in the point of when you do something to your best of your ability, it's embarrassing when someone highlights it. You still like it, but it's still embarrassing. So like I could spend 36 hours doing something for a lot of people, and then I could leave and no one would know, and I would be fine with that. It is harder to accept, like, it's harder to accept when someone makes a big deal out of it. So that is one of the things that I usually, if someone connects with me on that level, is kind of how I feel about being out of place, like being out of place of my own community. And when I watch like Japanese content, that's where I feel a bit home. Chinese content as well. Again, Chinese content is not as available. Where you do something really well, like for example, in the workplace, you work really hard, and then one day someone wants to give you an award. It's hard. It's hard to accept something like that, and it's very embarrassing. Like because you don't want to draw attention to yourself, but you're also willing to do the thing. And that's not the same in a Western culture. In a Western culture, at least the cultures that I interacted with, of course, not exhaustive, it feels good and it's expected. If you did a good job, people should take notice. That's entitlement to me personally. Not that you should feel bad about it if you belong to a culture. To me, if I'm telling myself I'm doing something for the good of my community, and the first thing I think about is why don't anyone notice that I'm doing these things, that is a personal guilt to me personally. So like when I think, oh yeah, I'm trying to provide the stuff, right? Like I'm trying to help people stop being depressed, or I'm trying to do all these things and connect with people, making learning fun again and all that. I wouldn't say those things because it's incredibly embarrassing to talk about your own efforts. If someone asks, I would try my best, but usually you're probably going to tell the difference, because most of the time someone in a Eastern culture will downplay literally everything that comes out of their mouth. It's almost like speaking to an imposter syndrome most of the time. Like, oh, that's okay. Like, I'm still working. No worries. Like, when someone comes in, it's like, oh, wait, this is very easy. Just do this and do this and do that, and you'll learn in no time. And I would say something like, oh, yeah, thanks. Like, I really appreciate it. I'll try my best. Like, I'll give it a go, right? I'm basically just learning at my own pace. I'm not entirely sure, but I'll try to make it work. Right. It's not the same as oh, don't worry, I got this. I've been learning stuff for like many years now, right? Many years now, and I got this in the bag. Like, don't worry, kind of thing. That's overconfident. That's boastful. Oh, almost embarrassing. Like saying that out of jokes, like even jabbing, is very uncomfortable. You typically just do it. So the when someone says something like, then how will anyone know you're good at something? Like, how do you know that you'll be qualified at something? You do it. You do it and you make yourself available. So if you want to show someone that you're around to help them with their problem, you do the problem yourself and show that you can do it, but you're not insisting that you're solving their problem. So whenever someone this is pretty much going to explain all the relationships I have with like Procol, Beth, right, and James and all the others. I show myself doing the similar things, or I show myself trying to do something that you are doing. And by showing that, that's all that exists. There's no, I'm telling you, hey Beth, this is how you do it. This is how you're going to be successful at Japanese, or this is what you should do. This is the best way you should do it. That's not how, in my opinion, how meritocracy works. Typically, for myself, I would do my best, and I expect every other people to take whatever they want from whatever I'm doing, or engage with me in a way that we understand both of us are working on something. Not that not either of us know better than the other person. That would be elevating your status without knowing the stranger, right? You don't go around flaunting your status. I mean, I'm not saying all of Japan or all of China would act like this. I've never lived in Japan or China, so I wouldn't know. By extension, usually my most comfortable operation is, if you're asking me to explain something, I'll explain it to the best of my ability without dictating to you that it is the best. So whenever someone asks me a question, I answer it to the best of my ability. And then it is up to the other person to determine if that advice is good. Not get upset when someone doesn't take your advice. That is, to me, what it's like when I talk to Western, like very Western heavy culture people. If someone is very, like, I don't know, they go around and say, I'm N1, I'm Japanese N1. So that means my advice is more important than someone who's N4. And my first thought is, I know who I'm talking to. I know, like, what type of person I'm talking to. It's very important to note these things. I would never lead, in my opinion. I rarely ever lead with saying, here are my credentials. I know better than you, so you're lesser than me. Or like you're a bigger authority. I would probably show them what I know. So whenever someone asks, right, this is kind of happens where I say, oh, I see that you have a PhD. Tell me something smart. I know who I know what type of person and what kind of cultural background I'm likely to be talking about. Or like, oh, I see that you completed this, so you must know this better than I do. It's like, I don't know. I can't say that for sure. We've just met. How could you be so presumptuous? In both ways. Like, someone who's trying to compliment me is uncomfortable because they wouldn't know. And then I would have to live up to that expectation. And then the other way, they wouldn't know either. So if someone says like, oh, I know more than you in Japanese because I know more about Japanese culture because I've learned, I spent more time reading and learning the Japanese language. I'm like, okay, that sounds like a very possible occurrence. Like, can you tell me something about these things? And they would go on to tell me, and I would learn from them. It's irrelevant if they think I'm stupid or I know less or I know more. The whole idea is they want to tell me that they're really good at Japanese culture and Japanese language. So that means I can benefit from them. I can listen and see what I can learn from them. There's no reason for me to try to say, oh, that's okay, I already know all the stuff that you know, and etc. There's no, like, you don't, at least in my opinion, it's not a priority to measure up or do some sort of competition. So that's probably one of the biggest things that occur on a daily basis. The very first thing that I talk to a stranger is they would ask, exchange pleasantries. How are you? I'm doing well. How are you doing? Thanks for asking, by the way. And then I would get to know what their day is like. And then when they share or they're willing to share about their day, then I would reciprocate because I want to make sure that they are comfortable in investing in this. Usually I wouldn't specifically say, oh, hey, let me tell you all about my interesting day. Why? Why would you do that first? That's kind of the idea. And others are far more comfortable in that. Like I wouldn't start with myself. And then I wouldn't start with my personal opinions either. This is very different when someone specifically asks me for my opinion. And even then, I would first ask them, what is the nature of your question? Like, if you ask me to recommend something, tell me something about yourself. Because otherwise, there's no way, I don't care how much experience I have, I'm not going to be willing to take a gamble without knowing something about you. At least in my opinion. Because speaking out of ignorance is still speaking out of ignorance. At least for myself. Like, for myself, I rarely want to speak out of ignorance. Presumptions are used for judgments. They're not used to act on. Like, what I mean by that is, I would say 80 to 90% of the time, I'm still accurate on the mark of how to communicate with someone. I still wouldn't act on it as though it is available to me. I would default to making sure first. And in dire situations, I might be able to act on my presumptions. But it's not dire most of the time. So the whole idea of like profiling and judgment is a great topic to talk about between a face culture and a individualistic culture. When you are presumptuous, right, in an individualistic projection, that's prejudice, stereotyping, discrimination, etc. Presumption, arrogance, pride. When you're doing it in order to make sure that you're behaving appropriately, that's communal. So you're trying to make yourself fit into an environment, not making yourself, drawing attention to yourself to stand out from your judgment. So those are like it's a really big difference, in my opinion. It's a subtle difference for anyone who doesn't notice. Like, for example, oh, I see, I was right about you. Stereotyping. Like, oh, hey, do you like fishing? Because I like fishing. Like, can we talk about fishing? That is trying to ask if that other person, for you're trying to confirm you trying to relate to the other person, not trying to stand out from the other person. So you could stereotype someone for your own benefit, or you can be using judgment and profile in order to expedite getting closer to someone, because you are interested in that person's literal details, not interested if you're accurate or not, or if you're correct. So one is discriminatory, the other one is face culture, right? Like, oh, this person's old, right? For example, this person's older than me. They must have really wonderful stories to tell. They are my senior. I should I should give them respect, right? You act that way to see if it's true, to fit in. You're not saying, oh, they're old, they must be really old, and everything about being old is true about them, so we're just going to assume that's right and then build on everything there. You're not seeking confirmation now. You're basically just building on the presumption. Like, for example, an old person is slow. That would be, or slower than you. And my first thought when I was talking about running was like, well, there are 60 and 70-year-olds that ran laps around me. You can't presume that old people will be slower than you despite being younger. That was my like counterexample to drama's quip about like having slow swimmers. And that's kind of the thing. Like, yes, I know, I'm aware that older people are likely going to be slower than younger people. The idea is you're not acting on the idea that you are right. You're acting on the idea that you should confirm. So, or do you know, you don't know. Like for me, my experience was, yeah, like much older people are like they can be extraordinary runners, like runners that would outpace me by a long shot. And I shared an anecdote about that, where I had when I was doing a 10K during Thanksgiving, uh, there was this very cute couple. I think they were like in their 60s. Both of them were in their 60s. The older gentleman had a radio, one of those like AM FM radio headphones, and then he had like one ear off, and he was like talking to his wife while they were running, and they were running at like a 9-minute mile pace. And my first thought was like, here's me, like I was 20, maybe 28 at the time, and I'm like, oh, I was starting to run at the time, and they're just like casually just chatting and running at a 9-mile pace, and both of them had a marathon shirt on the back, and we're just running a 10K on Thanksgiving morning. I was running it because I wanted to. I invited a couple of people, but none of them really wanted to run, so I went there, ran, and I'm like, I'm using them as pacing. They're just nonchalantly talking, and I'm like dying. And then it continued to happen. When you look around and concern yourself with things around you, you're gonna find examples, right? You're gonna find examples where you can be humbled, right? So you stay humble, at least in my opinion. It's very difficult to empathize with people who don't prioritize humility over like, I don't know, their need for affirmation. It also is what I mean whenever I say, oh yeah, maybe when I was younger I would be able to empathize better. Now that I'm getting older, that might be an age thing, right? So I wouldn't know. It would be interesting to see in the future if that changes. It could be a cultural thing, it could be a generational thing. I rarely find it. I said this to Drama yesterday, like in yesterday's video, yesterday's stream. It's interesting that the competition that Drama is having is with everyone else and all the people around them, all the people around that they, whatever activity they do. And for me, my priority is to be a better version of myself. That is the internal competition. If someone asked me to do a task, I would do it to the best of my ability. And then if they continue to trust me, I would continue to try to do better than I've done before. Because the only thing I can truly offer is the best that I have. Not because I'm better than someone else, or I can do something better than someone else. I am part of everyone else. So like we're all contributing to something. Now that is a different type of competition though, right? And it doesn't really flourish, in my opinion, in the at least the country that I grew up in. That doesn't really flourish too often. You do have to draw attention to yourself and whatnot, which here's a great inception point, right? Streaming, you have to draw attention to yourself in order to get ahead. Well, I didn't do that. It's not that I don't know how to do that. That is what I mean by the cultural divide. There's a difference between someone who chooses to do something knowing better, but not, like still not doing it, because typically when you ask them, they're happy. Like, if someone asks me, aren't you sad that you have like only one person or two people to talk to every once in a while, or you're just talking to yourself all the time? Like, no, because I know more than I let on, but I choose to do something that isn't appropriate for the thing. It's very different when someone is frustrated and say, I know what's the right way to do something, and I'm doing it and I'm still not successful. That's when you know that person, like, you'll see the difference. That person will be frustrated. They will actively become more frustrated that they think they know what the right ways things to do, and the results does not meet their expectation, right? That is someone who says, oh man, I completed this like no hit run on my favorite game and no one took notice. I posted this really awesome edited video that I did and it seems like no one cares. It's like, I don't understand. I'm doing all the right things. That is how I feel when I'm talking to some of the people that I talk to, and that's how they go about it. So if they ever want to talk to me and I need to talk to them, I need to understand that. I need to understand how they think, because otherwise it would be very difficult to like reach a compromise. And then there are people who get the results they want, doing the right thing, right? That's good. That's the ideal case. I don't think I've ever sat down and said, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm also frustrated. Like the worst situations are people who believe they don't know what the heck is going on, why their life really sucks, so why everything they touch doesn't work, and they also don't get the results from trying. That is suck. That's like a big suck. And to me, that's who I focus on. Whenever someone is unsure about themselves, but they are also unable to get themselves to do anything, right? Like be willing to try something, and then seeing the results not help out at all, and they're still in the dark, right? That constant cycle. That's what I feel like is the people I want to talk to, because I earnestly think that is where I feel more appropriate. How do my parents behave? Like when you're wondering, okay, right? Like, so how I believe personally as a foreigner, how do I believe that Chinese and Japanese families raise kids? Like, how do you think they would be able to raise their kids? Do they do the whole direct conversation and chastising and scolding? I don't think so. I think the majority is if the parent operates with dignity and the parents operate by example. That's what meritocracy is. So in a face culture, the way you act as a parent, like the way you hold yourself, the way you resolve, like as an adult, the way you resolve things, the way you show what you do, your children follow suit. So no, when I say, when someone asks, oh, you're really disciplined, like you hold your voice, you're very tolerant, your parents must really discipline you all the time. Like when you were growing up, you had good disciplines. Like my parents didn't do any disciplining. What they did was they showed me what it's like to be a disciplined person. So that's what I mean by the cultural difference. I stream learning Japanese and Chinese not because I know better than someone else. I stream to show how I do it and leave the criticism and feedback to anyone who's willing to see it or want to see it. And then I get the opportunity to grow from their stories. I don't care, in my opinion, if they think I'm learning the wrong way or I'm garbage or I have a lower brain cell or etc. It's like if they want to share that with me, then I'll take it. Like what I mean is I'll use it. I'll use it in a functional way. Like for example, if someone tells me like, "Oh, I'm learning the wrong way the 30th time," I would at least need to learn what they mean by I'm learning the wrong way. Because if I can gather enough information about all the ways I could be learning Japanese wrong, it means that I could functionally come up with demonstrating how I take all that information and make it right or make it better. That's what, in my opinion, reflects a Chinese growth. Like, you have examples of that. So when you go to Japan, in my opinion, this is only my opinion, and I've never been to Japan, right? When someone, say, like, coming from the United States, go to Japan, one of the first things that, in my opinion, that makes it so obvious that Japan can change someone like that is because you have so many good examples. You have examples that you want. So, like, when everyone's behaving courteously, the person who's transplanted in there will begin to behave courteously because all of the examples are unified. So, like, oh, now I'm, this person's like saying, oh, before I went to Japan, now that I've lived in Japan for 5 years, I'm a lot more reserved. I'm a lot more passively polite in public. I make sure I, take care of my environment, make sure my home is tidy and stuff. It's like because you're surrounded by examples. Like the internet. And if you're wondering like, oh man, but aren't humans built differently? Not really. Not in that situation, not in mere exposure. If you get enough examples around your life, that's what happens. When a child is around a parent that is always demonstrating like what they do, like being hardworking, I can't help but not notice that. Like my parents work 13 hours a day. Like to me personally, I don't even have an excuse to say I'm working too hard or I'm slacking off. Actually, I have more of an incentive to say that I'm slacking off than having an excuse. And that's how I compensate, is always acknowledging that it was through my parents' sacrifice. Like, and they don't think it's a sacrifice, actually. They usually think of it as that's the best they can do. In fact, oftentimes when you ask, if I ask them, like, you don't have to work anymore. Like, don't do this. You can use all the money you saved up because we no longer, like, you've raised good children who don't need your money. So use the money to your benefit, right? That type of thing. They would still say, well, that defeats the purpose of being parents. Right? Like, in fact, they would go further and say something like, well, if we were better at being parents, we would do even more if we could. Right? And that's what I would say too. Like, if I go back and if I ever meet and talk to my old mentors, like even those who aren't my immediate family, like visit my advisors, my academic advisors, my first thing I would say is I could have been a much better student. Like my first apology, like the first time I talked to my academic advisor in undergrad, I still remember this. Me and my best friends, we were sharing a pizza together. Our advisor invited us to a pizza place in the local area around our college. And the first thing I really wanted to express to tell him is like, I was not that great of a student. Like I was ever grateful that this person took a chance on me, right? And all of that. But the first thing I would think about is I could have done much more. Like I could have been a better student. And that's not because I'm trying to be modest. Like I understand that other people would project that onto me. They would say like, "Oh no, you're probably just downplaying and being modest about your achievements." Like, no, I really do feel like I could do better. I should have done better. And that's the mentality every time. Like whenever someone jokes about the Asian F, like when parents say like, "Oh, you got a 4.0," it's like you can do better. Do better next time, right? That type of thing. It's kind of a normal thing. It's like it's a bit of a sense of pride, but you could also see it as a masochistic thing. I have no idea. It's masochism in a sense that it's health. It's rewarding to do that. Like someone says like, "Oh yeah, you did a really great job." Like, "Oh, don't worry, it was the best I can do at the moment. Like I could do better next time." That's, in my opinion, why Japanese culture, I resonate so much with Japanese culture. And I would imagine it's very similar to Chinese culture. When you do something, you go above and beyond. If you try, above and beyond. It might be above and beyond for the person receiving the help, but you're just doing your job, which is what a lot of people sound when they go and do the tourism thing in Japan. Like someone would say something, "Oh yeah, this is really delicious, this is great." It's very complimentary. And at the same time, the person in reverse would say, "Don't worry about it. I've been doing this for many years. I'm always trying to do my best. It's my job. Like I'm always trying to do my best. That's what matters." Right? And that's kind of all I can say. And here's the thing. I've had a couple people in my life who said, "Well, your best is not good enough." And you take that, right? You take that, you're like, "Well, I'm sorry that my best is not good enough. I'll try better next time." Right? That's kind of, I don't think, that this is where like it falls off. Like someone would say, "Well, what if the problem is them?" And I'm like, "Well, the problem is both. Like it involves everyone." Like that's not fair. You shouldn't, I get this sometimes. Like you shouldn't sell yourself short. You did like 30% of the work, or like the majority of the work, right? But it was split among a lot of people. It's like you did the majority of the work, and you shouldn't have to feel bad about failing because you did most of the work. And my first thought is that we all failed, like together. There's no like one person is more important than the other. We all failed. So we should all try to bring us up together and elevate ourselves. No one person is more at fault than the other person. We're not playing a competition between like the job. And I still remember like maybe a year ago I was talking to this guy named Sub-Zero, and he was from Norway, and he talked about his group projects and all that, and then he talked about how he played video games and how like cheating and being the best or being better than other people because he's not a cheater, and or something like that. And whenever through that conversation about trying to like, okay, so how do you encourage people to not cheat or like do something by example? Why is it that other people's actions are affecting you when they don't directly affect you in the first place? And that type of conversation, literally we stopped talking after that. So that person specifically just took it and leave it and just ghosted after spending like 8 or 9 months talking about like topics about doing your best and achieving merits and whatnot. Doesn't line up most of the time. Like I always try to do my best, and sometimes my best at the moment is not good enough. Sometimes in the future my best is still not good enough. Does that stop me from doing my best or better? No, it doesn't. It shouldn't, at least in my opinion. So I keep trying until someone gives up on me. That's the perspective. And therefore, I don't leave regrets behind. Now, I'm still going to tell you I could have done better. It's not from a place of regret. In my opinion, it's a place with opportunity. So, whenever I go up to someone, maybe like I fell out of friendship with someone, right? And then we meet up again. It's like, man, I'm sorry I was such a poor friend who didn't stay in contact. We can try to do better this time. Or like I could try to do better this time, and then maybe we can work out something even more. Obviously, no guarantees. We gotta do the thing. It might not be good enough, but at least we did it. No regrets, right? Despite every time I'm gonna say, we could do better. We could probably do better. Let's do better starting now. Okay. That's enough for the digression. I hadn't talked about this stuff in some time. All of this Japanese stuff makes me think about this all the time. Alright, so to be considered and thought as, right?
最初はグーと最初に言ったのは志村けんだと考えられている。
Oh, rock, paper, scissors. 最初はグー。Yeah. I didn't think I would ever hear 最初はグー. Interesting. Okay. I remember reading a Wanikani like comment about why do we need to learn like rock paper scissors? It's not like we're ever gonna I'm ever gonna use that. And my first thought is like, what if you read it as an example? And here it is. Anyways. Okay.
このトンネルは日本で一番呪われているトンネルだと思われている。
Oh, okay. Cursed. Yeah, 呪われているタンネル Okay. The primary reason that these constructions are used in their displacement, passive form, displacement, is to show that the thought itself is not something that is related to the speaker's own opinion. Yep. Right, because of displacement, I get it. Okay. However, people will often use this form as a way to strengthen their own opinions. Fair enough. In a similar way to how English speakers would say, everyone knows that. Exactly. And man, they already explained this already. Yeah, this is the norm. Whenever an English speaker, in my opinion, 90% of the time, when they say something, it is asserted, it is inferred that online, when someone says something with forward directness, this statement is already made. Here's an example. 2 days ago, someone said, "How are you?" from Morocco, right? And then they asked me, do you learn any Arabic, right? Like, are you planning on learning? And I would say I wasn't planning. Do you know Arabic? And they responded with, yes, of course. And my first thought is, well, I guess that tells me that Morocco probably has one of Morocco's national languages, probably Arabic. Right? because it's inferred that everyone knows that. That's what it means. Like when someone says, yes, of course, it's inferring that everyone knows. And I'm like, well, I didn't. Which is the awkward part, right? Because I wasn't confident. Or even if I was, I would not acknowledge, I would not assert on that. I wouldn't say something like, oh, you must know Arabic because it's one of the national languages of Morocco, probably, right? I would say probably. I couldn't even say Morocco is like Arabic is one of the national languages of Morocco, even though I know now that it is, right? Which is what this is basically addressing.
カバは世界で最も危ない動物だと考えられている。
Yep. See, like everyone knows that hippos are the most dangerous animal in the world. It is believed, right? Basically, it is considered that hippos are one of the most dangerous animals in the world. Not everyone knows that. Like, not everyone knows that hippos are the most dangerous animal in the world. Not everyone. It is believed, it is considered that a large majority of people know the common wisdom that hippos are potentially dangerous animals. I'm adding a bunch of like modifiers that makes it softer because that is how I naturally speak. All right. This one's kind of... This is going to be tough. So... I guess this is the potential form, right? Kongae... No. Kongaerare... Arete. So, kongaerareru? And then that's just the te form? I don't think it. So this is omoware. Yeah, I'm not sure. All right, well, we'll just play by ear. Okay. Oh, and sarete. Oh, is that the ending? Wait. Does that make sense? No. It doesn't make sense. Sareteiru. So what is sarete? Or sareru? To sareteiru is an expression that's commonly translated to be considered as a or to be regarded as a, right? Conceptually is similar to nisuru, which means to decide on. However, due to suru being in the passive form in this construction, it is easier to be decided on and express the general opinion thought of large groups of... Wait, is this a suru form? Oh. A passive suru? I'm kind of lost. The to in this expression is a case marking particle and express the result nuance. Oh, it is. Okay.
今の時代にはインターネットが必要だとされている。これはニコラ・テスラが発明したものだとされている。
So it is a form. And it's probably a form of the other two verbs too. The main difference between to as a case marking particle and to as a conjunction particle is that the case marking particle will always link a single word phrase to one specific word or result. The conjunction particle, on the other hand, will often be followed by a toten. Oh, Japanese count. As it is separating two distinct thoughts within the sentence rather than just a simple result. Mizu wa 水は氷となる。Case marking particle. Okay, and then conjunction. Hot. 温度が0度になると、水は氷となる。Oh, I see. I see. A Japanese comma, they say. I'm not sure if I understand the difference between... And it doesn't really show the relationship between the two of them. Like between using 考えられて versus されて or what was the other one? 思われて. Okay. We'll just have to go with it. Okay. I really want to hear the WP. I don't know what WP is, or pay maybe. P. Oh no, this is P, but what is W? Generally considered. I can't tell which one. Let's go with
論文 WP40 は使用が多いとされている。
W. Okay. Okay. WP. Okay. Let's just go with the W. I thought maybe it would be different. Okay. Alright. Cool. So I still don't know how I would tell the difference between されて and like the other two. Asobi ni ikitara. Uh-oh. What was the ending? Go. Oh, polite? Wait. Advice. I thought it was Iki. Yeah. Right? What? I think I'm conjugating the maybe like I don't know what the maybe yeah, I have no idea. Okay. Oh, it's treated as okay. It's treated as the okay, I got you. So it's not the same as more polite. How do you do? Oh, right. You could add. You could add. Uh.
公園に遊びに行ったらどうですか？
Hang on. So I actually have no idea how this works. How do you conjugate the verb? So it's a ta. Oh, past tense ta. No, maybe not. Or hmm. Uh. Uh. I don't know if this is gonna bring it up. Is it the same as past tense? Sure. So maybe I could bring it up this way. Like this? Oh no, it's not. Oh no. No, it's not the same. Okay, ta-da. Guessing is this, and I do see it. But how do I know? I don't know if this is the point. Adjective. Oh no. No, this is different too. It's not this one. I don't understand how I know that's here's ita. Okay, let's think about this. Okay, shitara. Okay. This is adjective. Why is this? Oh, wait. Iki takata. That's adjective. Pseudo. Copula. Pseudo. Oh, well, actually, not really. It's just is, but past tense, casual. Oh, and this is the adjective. I have no idea. Like what the conjugation rules are for this. Like if I'm looking at this, right? So it says ikara. I don't know how you get from iku to this. I immediately thought it was iki. Why don't you go play? When the conjunction particle tara is used before the adverb do. Oh, wait. No, it still takes me to this note. What about this? This is the past tense. E adjective. Okay. Why does this take me to the E adjective? Are you telling me that this is a special case where, oops, this is a special case where this E ended up being treated? Okay. We'll have to come back to this. I actually, yeah, I have no idea. No idea how I know that. Let's look at examples. So, あそこ、このゴミを、OK、拾ったら。So, verbs, you take this. I need another example. して、okay, that's 見たい. But then, 見たい, it's me, and then add with tara. That's an ichidan, right? So am I thinking all godans? Okay, all godans have a. You just add tsu into tara. Kairu. Yeah, kairu is godan. Hajime is not. So it just goes in hajime tara. I guess that's pretty much what I'm gonna default to. It looks like so oboe, yeah, oboeru is in ichidan. I guess that's all I'm gonna consider for now. Does this tell me anything? It really doesn't. And then when I click on this leads to something that I don't think it's related. Alright, I'll just take it for what it is. We're just gonna do Godans. Godans, just that's it. And no alternatives. Alright. That's kind of a tough one. Legitimately have no idea. Wait, where are we with this? Can I use either? 考えられている。
イルカはとても賢いと考えられている。
られている。Yeah, I don't know where the conjugation for tada is. I know I've seen it before though. Alright, and then we're gonna do the last two. And then that's gonna be the day. Since I kinda just indulged in my monologuing. Okay, and then now it is said is known as, how is this? Oh my gosh. Okay, so now we have iwarete iru. It is said that, as opposed to, it's still known. It's often translated as to be said that, or is known that a, like. Okay. Sareteru. It is another construction that links the case marking particle with the passive form of another verb to mark a commonly held public opinion. The verb in this case is being used. However, unlike sarete specifically, which expresses a result, iwarete expresses a quotation. Inyo. To use iwareteiru, add it to the end of a phrase that you would like to express as a common thing that is said. Okay.
大阪のたこ焼きは日本一美味しいと言われている。
Fair enough.
ティフアナは世界一危険な街と言われている。
Interesting. This particular grammar point is regularly seen both with and without the kanji for you, as the meaning will not change depending on its use. Okay, so then we have the kangaerarete comparison. It is said, okay, it is thought, right? Both softens a statement and makes it feel more objective or widely accepted. This can make an idea sound more trustworthy or backed by others. Both are formal and common writing. Okay. The more you know. That lines up with everything else. Are we gonna get another one? Oh no, okay. Should have, I wish it would have been better. Yokatta. Ba. So we're talking about potential. Ba. No, conditional ba. Conditional, right? Wait. Yeah, conditional. Okay. So, adding yokatta to the conditional of a verb, specifically a verb, is a common expression used when someone regrets that something was not done. It is a pairing of the conjunction particle ba and the past form of the, oh yeah, e adjective, right? Yokatta. Remember that conjunction of is used yo and not e. This construction is often translated to I wish I did or I should. Okay. Yokatta is yokatta, okay, is used after verbs, so requires a standard ba and conjunction before adding yokatta.
サービスエリアが一つもないじゃないか。高速に乗る前にトイレに行けばよかった。今日も残業。昨日は早く寝ればよかった。
As ba highlights hypothetical situations, ba yokatta literally means that it would have been good if, you know, where A is the thing that speaker wish had happened. This grammar point is in direct contrast to ba yi, the non-past version, which is used to express it would be good if. Okay. 運転のしたくなかったらなかた oh my gosh したくなかったらokay したくなかったら電車で行けばいい。Oh my god. All right. Oh, and then te yokatta, to be glad. Yeah, fair enough. Though they may look similar, they express opposites, right? Yeah. One is the relief of having something happen versus one is the regret about something not happening. All right. I don't remember how the conditional... Is it just the de? Okay. Oh, and then there's this, the e adjective stuff. I don't think they gave an example of that. It's specifically attached to a verb. And it's a de or e. Okay. Uh ないと言われているのでしない方がいいよ。
危ないと言われているのでしない方がいいよ。
危ないと言われているのでしない方がいいよ。の電車を待てば待てばはよかった。
次の電車を待てばよかったです。
待てばよかったです。we should be, yeah, okay. Alright, so I yapped a lot today. Tomorrow we start our review stuff. Like, tomorrow we start a straight up review. So we're probably gonna crunch through a bunch of vocabulary too. We start our review month. June is our review month. So I kind of indulged today. We'll crush out our grammar, hopefully. And figure out the weak spots. And then for vocabulary, we're going to crunch them. Hopefully like 100, 200-ish. Probably by the first half of the month, we'll cover at least... go back up to get up back to speed. Wanikani is staying the same, right, for another 20 days, so most of the month, and then it will be acting as a reference soon. The first thing we do tomorrow though is we'll probably do all the grammar tomorrow, and tomorrow is Wanikani's 500-day tentative take. So I'll talk about how in the next 100 days, Wanikani is going to end up having lots of 0 days because we'll no longer have lessons anymore. And it will be used as a secondary reference. It'll be used as a reference material for all the vocabulary. That's pretty much what the reference material is. That's why, like, I'm not in too much of a hurry to build this out, not to do big of a deal. We can retroactively catch up really quickly, and then in another 2 or 3 days, like our Hanzahiro sentence construction. But anyways, that's a wrap for May. solid lessons. So all of the lessons, I tried my best to practice the routine of encoding the grammar points, and the vocabulary points. The vocabulary may or may not be weak. I think we still got a solid 10% of them are kind of new. So kind of new. And we'll see how well that works out. And we'll use Wanikani as a reference for that. So, off to June. Probably at the end of June, right near like the last day of June, we'll do a N5, one of the N5 practice here. And then in the next cycle, right, in the N3 cycle, we'll do like another one of these, and then in N4, and so on and so forth. That's kind of the idea. Just space them out and iterate on them. I talked a lot about the cultural aspect, at least in my opinion, inferring through the language, like the Japanese language part, quite a lot. I think learning a language, some say that you can learn a lot about a culture indirectly or directly, or even through the use or participation in a language. I agree. I'm not entirely sure if I get that same reciprocation when I'm talking to people, because their behaviors are often compartmentalized from the importance. Like, some say they really like the Japanese language, and yet from the day to day feel very disinterested in the nuances of the language, almost to the point of frustration or active ignorance, like actively ignoring things. I feel maybe that will change or not when they partake in the use of that language and into another culture. I don't necessarily think it is absolutely necessary to be able to do that, right? People are different upbringings, different sensitivities, different prioritizations. So being able to internalize things culturally or by extension, it will vary. Today I just, I guess I lost myself in my own monologue on how it is very refreshing to learn another language, especially when that language is so tied into you can glean a lot from its internal structures and emphasis through the description of people I would say aren't foreigners anymore per se, because a Bunpro crew is based in Osaka, and I imagine a lot of this is written in retrospect in like a English speaking way. So they make a lot of commentary, infer a lot of commentary in the grammar points. And I really enjoy having those thought-provoking rhetoric in my head. So today I shared something at length, like easily, 5 hours? Oh, no, not easily 5 hours. We had one Ikani lesson today. So 3 hours-ish. I would be saying these things with or without recording, because that's kind of how I learn things. I remember things and remember points based on how I connect with them. So it might be not a big deal to others. That's fair enough. I like learning language, so it's a big deal to me. And I like the Japanese culture, right? I think the Japanese culture is a big deal. That would include its language and all of the above. So that's a wrap for Bunpro today. If you're gonna watch this later, or you find some of this stuff interesting, right? Arigatou gozaimasu. As always, feel free to follow along, pick up Bunpro for yourself, give it a go. You're always welcome to come on by, yap, banter, hear me drone on about things, right? It's always a opportunity to keep each other motivated to learn, get cultured, I suppose, expand our perspectives. So until next time, 皆さんまたね。見てくれてありがとう. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. I'm gonna get up, stretch, walk around, and I'll be back for Hanzuhiro. Thank you.